Tok, Alaska markets itself as the coldest inhabited community in North America. On Monday afternoon, it was under a red flag warning, and the northern half of the town was told to leave immediately. A fire that measured 20 acres at noon measured more than 1,500 acres by 7 that evening. 75 times larger in about 7 hours. Between 6 and 10 structures are gone. By the end of this, you will understand why a fire this small pulled Alaskan firefighters back from other states, and why the acreage is the least important number in it. The fire that forced part of Tok, Alaska out of its homes on Monday started in somebody's backyard. Not in remote country, not at a lightning strike site 50 miles from the nearest road. It started off the Alaska Highway near Sundog Trail, close to milepost 1,316, on the western edge of a town of about 1,500 people. The call came in shortly before noon local time. Satellite thermal detection puts the first detectable signature of the fire at roughly 11:40 in the morning, Alaska Daylight Time, which means the ground crews were looking at it inside of 20 minutes. When the Alaska Division of Forestry and Fire Protection sized it up, they put it at about 20 acres and described it, in their own words, as very active. Winds of around 20 miles per hour were pushing it northeast through the Sundog and Midnight Sun residential area, and there was a power line down at the scene on the ground, actively arcing. The agency told people to stay away from the area and to approach no downed lines. That line is the part of this story that matters most, and it is also the part that has to be stated carefully. The Division of Forestry has said that a downed, arcing power line near Red Fox Drive is believed to be the source of the fire. They have also said in the same breath that the exact cause remains under investigation. Believed to be under investigation. Those are the words the agency is using, and they are the words this story is stuck with until a formal determination comes out. Here is the geography you need to hold on to. The Alaska Highway runs east and west through Tok, and on Monday afternoon, that 2-lane road was functioning as the fire's southern boundary. That is, the entire reason the southern half of the community stayed out of it. A road, and the cleared shoulder on either side of it, was the fire line. Everything north of the pavement was on the wrong side. At 1:15 in the afternoon, roughly 90 minutes after the first report, the evacuation order came down. It was a Level 3 GO order, covering Tok north of the Alaska Highway, from Sundog Trail to Midnight Sun Drive, everything north of milepost 1,316.5. In Alaska's evacuation terminology, Level 3 GO is the top of the scale. It does not mean get ready. It does not mean gather your documents and think about where you might go. It means leave, right now, in what you're wearing. Alaska State Troopers and Division of Forestry personnel went door to door to deliver it. 15 minutes after that, at 1:30, the National Weather Service issued a red flag warning for the upper Tanana Valley, including Tok. Hot, dry, windy. It was set to run until 7 o'clock that evening. 2 evacuation shelters opened, the Tok Dog Mushers Association Hall at 1,311 Alaska Highway and Tok School on John Summer Drive off the Tok Cutoff. Both took people, pets, and large animals. The American Red Cross helped at the school. Sam Harrell, an information officer with the Division of Forestry, said the school had received more evacuees than the Mushers Hall, and that roughly a dozen people had formally checked in across the 2 sites by Monday evening. Fast Eddie's, the restaurant on the highway that anybody who has driven the Alaska Highway knows, was evacuated as a precaution and was not damaged. Hold on to that number for a second. Roughly a dozen people formally checked in a town of 1,500 with an entire half of it under a mandatory order. That is not a sign that the order was ignored. It is a sign of what a small Alaskan community actually does in an emergency, which is disperse into the homes of people they know north up the highway, out of the smoke. The shelter count is not the evacuation count, and it never was. By 7 o'clock Monday evening, about 7 hours and 20 minutes after the first report, the Division of Forestry put the Mukluk fire at more than 1,500 acres. Run that against the first size up, 20 acres at noon, more than 1,500 acres at dinner. That is a growth factor of roughly 75 times in about 7 hours, which works out to an average of something like 210 acres an hour, sustained across the whole afternoon. And the direction was east and northeast, running roughly parallel to the Alaska Highway, in the direction of the Tanana River. I want to be honest about that 1,500 figure, because it is going to change. It is a field estimate issued by people standing next to a moving fire with a radio in their hand. It is not a mapped perimeter. Early acreage numbers on running fires routinely differ from the mapped figure in both directions, sometimes by a lot. When the first real perimeter is published, expect it to disagree with 1,500, and do not read that disagreement as anybody hiding anything. It is just the difference between an estimate and a measurement. Between 6 and 10 structures had burned as of Monday evening. That figure comes from the Division of Forestry, and the agency was explicit that it may include homes, outbuildings, or both. There is no confirmed count of houses lost. Nobody has published one, and anybody giving you a number of destroyed homes right now is making it up. There have been no reported injuries and no reported deaths connected to this fire. A 75-fold expansion in 7 hours sounds like an exaggeration until you know what is growing on the ground around Tok. The interior Alaskan boreal forest does not resist fire. It is assembled around it. Black spruce, the tree that dominates this country, is what fire ecologists call a fire embracer. Its cones are partially sealed with resin that only opens under heat, so the tree is built to reseed the exact ground its parent generation burned off. Its branches carry all the way down to the surface. Its foliage is loaded with resin, and the whole structure works as a continuous ladder from the litter on the ground straight up into the canopy. This is a species that does not tolerate crown fire. It requires it. Underneath the spruce is the other half of the problem. A mat of feather moss and organic duff, sometimes tens of centimeters thick, sits on the forest floor. Wet, that layer is close to fireproof. Dry, it becomes a porous, low-density fuel that lights easily and burns downward into itself. And the transition between those two states is fast. A few days of warm, dry weather, sometimes a few hours, is enough to pull the moisture out of the surface moss. That is why Monday looked the way it did. The fuel bed around Tok had been sitting in warm, dry conditions long enough to cross a line, and 20-mile-per-hour wind was waiting on the other side of it. Sam Harrell put it plainly. It had been very warm and very dry in Tok. Fires were highly susceptible to a spark and easy to spread, pushed by the winds, and that is what happened. There is a longer horizon problem hiding in that moss layer, worth exactly one paragraph. The same organic mat that carries these fires is the layer that insulates the permafrost underneath. Burn it off, and the deeper soil becomes far more exposed to thaw, and the ancient carbon frozen in it becomes available to decompose. Boreal fires tend to warm the system on net, not just from what burns above ground, but from what they unlock below it. Far more of what burns in Alaska is soil, and far more of it is old. Here is where the Mukluk Fire stops behaving like a 1,500-acre incident. Watch what showed up. By 2:25 Monday afternoon, 9 smoke jumpers were on it, along with the CATG squad, a crew associated with the Council of Athabaskan Tribal Governments, local Tok area fire departments, numerous Division of Forestry engines, and a helicopter. By 4:15, 4 helicopters were working water buckets. Dozers were cutting line for structure protection. A helitack team came in from Fairbanks, 200 miles to the northwest. Fire engines were dispatched from the Matsu Valley and from the Kenai Peninsula, several hundred road miles away. Then it went further than that. The Chevak Fire Crew, a village-based emergency firefighter crew from western Alaska, arrived Monday evening. 3 Alaska wildland firefighting crews that were deployed in the lower 48 were recalled to come home and fight this. Additional state resources were committed, and air tankers from Washington State and from Canada were reported en route. Officials also requested a temporary flight restriction over the fire and warned the public that a single hobby drone can ground every aircraft working the head of it. Now put that inventory next to the acreage. 9 smoke jumpers, 4 helicopters, engines from 2 other regions of the state, a village crew, dozers, crews flying back across a continent, and tankers inbound from 2 jurisdictions, for a fire under 1,500 acres. In most of the lower 48, 1,500 acres is a Tuesday. It does not get a name in the national news. In Alaska, it drew a response scaled for something 10 times its size, and that is not an overreaction. It is policy. Alaska does something no other American state does at this scale. It decides before the season starts which fires it is going to put out. Under the Alaska Interagency Wildland Fire Management Plan, the entire state is mapped into 4 management options, agreed among the land agencies and reviewed every year. Critical is the top tier, the highest priority for suppression, reserved for the ground with the greatest risk to human life and to structures, and it gets very aggressive initial attack. Full is 1 step down, protecting moderately populated areas, cultural sites, developed facilities. Modified is an intermediate response that can be adjusted as the season shifts. And limited is applied where there is minimal risk to human safety, which means fire is allowed to keep doing its ecological job, with protection only around specific things that need protecting. When a new fire starts, managers decide how hard to hit it based on which polygon it started in and what resources exist that day. That is the structural fact that makes Monday make sense. The Mukluk Fire did not draw an enormous response because it was big. It drew an enormous response because of where it was standing. If you want proof that this system is real and not just paperwork, It was burning at the same time, in the same state, in the same summer. The Tatlanika Fire was discovered on the 20th of June in the Tanana Flats, between Tatlanika Creek and the Wood River. It was designated limited protection. It was monitored by Fairbanks area forestry rather than attacked. Smoke from it drifted across interior Alaska for weeks. By the 13th of August, it had reached 31,421 acres, and a response was only mobilized on the 8th of August, nearly 7 weeks after it was found, as conditions changed. Think about what that means in practice. A fire 20 times the size of the one at Talk spent most of a summer as a line item on a monitoring report, producing smoke that people in Fairbanks were breathing without a single crew being sent to stop it. That was the correct call, made in advance on a published map, by agencies that had already decided there was nothing in the Tanana Flats worth risking a firefighter's life to defend. 31,000 acres watched. 1,500 acres swarmed. Nothing about that is incoherent. It is the system working precisely the way it was designed to work. But it means the acreage number on any Alaskan fire tells you almost nothing about how serious the situation is. What tells you is where the fire is standing. And the Mokluk fire started in the one category of ground where fire is not permitted to happen. Late Monday, the weather turned, and it turned in Talk's favor. The red flag warning expired at 7 in the evening. Light rain arrived overnight, along with cooler temperatures and calmer winds, and the Division of Forestry reported that the change was helping suppression and clearing smoke out of the town. Firefighters worked through the night. That is the good news, and it is real. But the fire danger rating for the area stayed at very high. Burn restrictions stayed in effect, and the forecast for Tuesday called for temperatures climbing back towards 70 degrees Fahrenheit with southwest gusts building into the 30-mile-per-hour range, with fire danger expected to increase again through the afternoon. The evacuation stayed in place overnight, and as of the last verified update, no timeline had been announced for residents to go home. Rain that falls on a boreal fuel bed for a few hours does not fix it. The surface moss takes the water and gives it back to the atmosphere quickly once the sun and the wind return. What Monday night bought Taka was time, and the question of what the town did with that time is the story of yesterday afternoon. Now here is the context that makes this fire genuinely strange, and it is the part almost nobody outside Alaska knows. Alaska was having one of the quietest fire seasons in 3 decades. Through the end of July, according to Rick Toman, the climate specialist with the Alaska Center for Climate Assessment and Policy, only about 43,000 acres had burned across the entire state. That is less than 10% of the median for the years 1993 through 2025. It is the third lowest through July total in that whole period. July on its own produced 13,700 acres, less than half of what June produced, and the fourth lowest July in 34 years. At the end of July, the largest fire in the entire state of Alaska was the Kilolitna Fire north of Tanana, at 4,500 acres. Toman's own comparison is worth repeating. In an active season, there might be 2 or 3 dozen fires larger than that burning in Alaska at once. And this was not a season without ignitions. That is the detail that reframes everything. Toman documents 2 significant lightning episodes, one in late June and one in early July, with total strike counts only slightly below the median since 2012. Fires were starting all summer. What was missing was the weather and the fuel state to grow them. In his words, fuel conditions and weather had not been conducive to wildfire growth, and a lack of sustained hot and dry weather was likely the reason fires stayed small. Read that carefully, because it changes what a quiet season means. Area burned is a record of what happened to the fires that started. It is not a measurement of how dangerous the ground was. Alaska had the ignitions. It lacked the growth weather. And growth weather is a condition that can reverse over a single afternoon, which is exactly what it did on Monday, in the 3rd week of August, well past the point in the calendar when the high-latitude fire season is supposed to be winding down. A quiet season in Alaska has a consequence that almost never gets discussed, and Monday put it on full display. When Alaska is not burning, it lends its people out. It is one of the country's net exporters of wildland firefighting capacity. And in 2026, it exported heavily. 4 Alaska crews were sent to the lower 48, staged first through Boise, Idaho, on 2-week assignments with the possibility of extension. Type 2 initial attack crews, Federal Wildland Fire Service crews, and contract modules went to Utah, Colorado, Oregon, and Idaho. At one point, 90 Alaska personnel were assigned to the Aspen Acres fire in southern Colorado, which had burned at least 96,000 acres since the end of June. An Alaska-based incident management team was running the response to a major Colorado fire. That decision was sound, and it was made publicly. Alaska's own conditions had improved enough to release crews while keeping enough capacity at home to respond. Nobody was reckless here. But there is a cost attached to that arrangement, and it was paid 6 days before the Mukluk Fire started. On the 11th of August, Leslie R. Washington, 41 years old, of Norvik, Alaska, died after suffering a medical emergency while assigned to the Bear Trap Fire on the Minnesota-Canada border in the Superior National Forest near Ely. He was a member of the K River 2 crew, a tribal firefighting crew from Alaska. Officials have not released the cause and nature of his death. A procession escorted his body from Ely, Minnesota, to Superior, Wisconsin, and Minnesota's governor ordered flags, flown at half-staff at all state buildings in his honor. His remains were being returned home to Alaska in the days immediately before the fire at Tok started. Then Monday happened, and the arrangement ran backwards. On the day a fire burned into an Alaskan town, 3 Alaska crews were in other people's states and had to be recalled. Air tankers had to be requested from Washington and from Canada. The response the Mukluk Fire drew was enormous, and it arrived. But it arrived by reaching across a continent because the season had looked safe enough to lend the closer resources away. The protection map promises everything for a fire in a critical polygon. What that promise is actually worth on any given day depends entirely on what is parked inside the state when the call comes. None of this is new to Tok, and that is the part the people who live there already understand. In July of 1990, a lightning-caused fire on the Tok River burned toward the town and very nearly took it. It started on a Sunday. By Wednesday, driven by wind, it had jumped the Tok River. By Thursday, it had crossed the Alaska Highway. It arrived at the edge of town as a 14,000-acre fire and forced the evacuation of almost everyone. Most of the town's roughly 1,200 residents were moved 12 miles north up the highway to the village of Tanacross, where they camped outdoors on an airstrip. More than 1,000 firefighters worked it. Bulldozers cut trenches between the town and the flames, and the fire ran over the lines anyway. At the last moment, the wind shifted, and the fire turned just short of the first building. Residents named it the Miracle Wind. It kept burning the rest of that summer and eventually passed 100,000 acres. Same town, same valley, same fuel, same experience of an evacuation order arriving faster than anyone's plan. The differences matter too. 1990 was lightning, and this one is believed to be infrastructure. 1990 came in July at the height of the season. This came in the 3rd week of August. And 14 years after that, the same corner of Alaska produced the Taylor Complex, 7 fire incidents northeast of Tok in 2004 that burned 1,303,000 acres, inside a record season that burned more than 6.5 million acres statewide. It destroyed almost nothing because of where it burned. 1.3 million acres, almost no losses. 1,500 acres, 6 to 10 structures gone. In Alaska, the relationship between how much burns and how much is lost is not just weak. In the cases that actually matter, it runs backwards. 3 things will tell you what this fire actually was, and none of them are settled yet. The first is the mapped perimeter. The 1,500-acre figure is Monday evening's field estimate, and the first properly mapped number will be the first honest measurement of what burned. It has not been published. The second is the cause determination. The Division of Forestry named a downed, arcing power line near Red Fox Drive as the believed source on day 1, while the fire was still running, and said the investigation is ongoing. Whether that finding holds, and if it does, why the line came down, decides whether this is a weather story or an infrastructure story. Those are 2 very different conversations about what Alaska does next. The third is what yesterday afternoon did to it. Fire danger was forecast to climb again on Tuesday, near 70 degrees with southwest gusts into the 30s, against a fire that was still active with no published containment figure and evacuations still in effect. Whether the Mukluk Fire made a second run, and whether the recalled crews and the inbound tankers arrived before or after it tried, is the immediate question this morning. The larger point stands regardless of how those 3 resolve. A season measured in acres told Alaska it was having its safest summer since the early 1990s. One afternoon of wind and one downed line arcing into dry moss said something completely different, and both statements came out of the same data. If you only watch the acreage, you will miss the fires that reach people, because those fires have never been the big ones. They have been the ones that started close.